On the 14th day, Gerrit Voss grabbed the old man's collar. He had planned it as a lesson, a final, unambiguous lesson about what happened to people who refused to learn their place. He had 14 days of escalation behind him, 14 days of the old man's silence, which he had read as weakness, and which was something else entirely. His hands found the fabric. He shoved. The old man's back met the storage rack with a sound that was heavier than Gerrit expected. The impact shifted Rod Aguilar's right arm. The sleeve of the maintenance uniform rode up 2 inches. 2 inches was enough. Gerrit looked down. He looked at the inside of the old man's right forearm, at the ink there, in the fluorescent light of the equipment room, the trident, the citation marking. The script beneath it in a language Gerrit did not read. He did not need to read it. He had spent his whole life surrounded by military culture. He knew what a Navy Cross citation marking looked like. He had seen them in photographs, in museum cases, in the framed images on his grandfather's wall. He had never seen one on a man's living skin, standing in front of him, in a room he had just turned into the scene of a crime. The fabric was still in his hands. He let go. The sound of his hands releasing the collar was the quietest sound in the room. Paloma Cruz, standing in the equipment room doorway, had taken 1 step forward. She had not been fast enough, but she had stepped. She would think about that step for a long time, whether it had been enough, whether 1 step forward before the contact was the same as no step, whether the notebook would know the difference. She would learn the answer to that question in 4 days. Have you ever watched 28 people go completely still at the same moment? Not the stillness of attention or respect, but the stillness that comes when a room understands. All at once, that the world just reorganized itself while everyone was looking in the wrong direction? Hold that image. Because you are about to see what 14 days of recorded silence looks like when it finally speaks. Before we go deeper into this story, type 777 in the comments and tell us where you are watching from. If stories about the ones who carry everything without announcement and how long it takes rooms full of power to understand what they are standing next to move you, please like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Do not miss what the notebook says. Rod Aguilar came from Zamboanga City to the United States at 19 with 1 sea bag, an enlistment contract, and a ring his father had pressed onto his right hand at the gate. Tate Luis was a fisherman. He had fished the Moro Gulf for 31 years from a boat that had belonged to his own father and that he had patched and repatched until patching was more of the hull than the original wood. He was a small brown man whose hands were the color of the sea's most honest work, and he had never been outside the Zamboanga Peninsula in his life, and he understood. With the particular intelligence of a person who has spent a lifetime reading weather and water, exactly what he was sending his son into. He had the ring made by a metalsmith in the market. Silver plain, no decoration on the outside. On the inside, in the metalsmith's careful hand, guided by Tate Luis's instruction, Dalin, carry, at the gate, holding the ring out, Rodrigo, Dalin mo ang aming pangalan ng may karangalan, carry our name with honor. And before that, the day before the gate, at dinner, over rice and grilled fish that Tate Luis had caught that morning, he said the thing that Rodrigo had heard before and would hear again, in the way fathers say things they mean completely. Rodrigo, ang taong walang may pagmalaki ay siyang humahamak sa iba. Huwag kang maging ganon. A person who has nothing to be proud of is the one who demeans others. Do not become that person. Rod had heard it as wisdom. He had not yet understood it as prophecy. He understood it now. He had understood it for 36 years, in every unit he had ever served in every person he had ever watched decide what to do with their size and their rank and their certainty about who mattered. He understood it the way you understand something that has been confirmed so many times it has become structural, not a belief you hold but a truth you live inside. He had joined the Navy at 19 and had become a SEAL at 22, which was early enough that the people who processed him still looked twice at the name on the paperwork. He had deployed 22 times. He had done things in places whose names appeared in history books now and in classified documents that would not appear anywhere for 30 more years. He had buried men he loved. He had brought home men he was told could not be brought home. He had been awarded the Navy Cross for an operation in a Philippine sea corridor in 2007. The specific location was still classified. But he thought about it every time he smelled salt water, which was every time he was at Coronado. He had retired at 55 and spent 6 years doing what retired men with his specific history do: advising, consulting, sitting on review boards, drinking coffee with people who had done the same things in different places and different decades. It was good work. It was not the work. The work, the actual work, the thing he had given 36 years to, was in the compound. It was in the people coming through the gate every September, 19 and 20 and 22 years old, carrying the names of fathers and grandfathers and the specific weight of having wanted something hard for a long time and being afraid of not being enough. Captain Marisol Diaz had called him 11 years ago. She was a year into her commandancy, and she had a problem she did not know how to solve. The assessment tools for SEAL candidates measured everything that could be measured and almost none of what mattered. And she knew this. And she knew he was the person who could fix it. And she also knew that asking him would require him to trade an office and a title for a maintenance uniform and a mop. And she said so, directly, because she had learned directness from the man she was calling. He had said yes before she finished the sentence. Every September since, he arrived at Coronado 3 days before the new class. He signed in with facilities management. He put on the gray uniform. He picked up the mop. He went to work. His room at the end of the maintenance wing was 8 feet by 10. The cot was his own. He had brought the mattress from his apartment. The same mattress, same dimensions, same firmness. Because he had learned in his 20s that the quality of sleep was not optional for a person doing the kind of observational work that required full attention from the first hour of every day. The footlocker under the cot held one change of clothes, his notebook, a key, and a small laminated photograph of Tate Luis outside the boat. The photographs on the desk, 3 of them, he kept face down. This was not sentimentality. He kept them face down because maintenance workers are invisible in proportion to how little personality they display, and photographs on a desk are personality. And he could not afford to be visible in any way that his uniform and his work did not create. He ran every morning at 4:15. The compound was his for 45 minutes before the first shift began. He had learned the compound's bones the way Tate Luis had learned the Gulf, by being in it alone, in the dark, in every weather, until it had no secrets from him, and he had no questions about where everything was. The ring on his right hand he turned when he was thinking, when the cost of the role was high, when something he was witnessing required him to contain more than he wanted to contain. He had been turning it more this year than last. Dallin. Carey. Garrett Voss stepped off the transport on a Monday in late September with the specific energy of someone who has been told his whole life that places like this one are his by inheritance. His grandfather had been a Marine colonel. His father ran a defense contracting firm that had, among other things, provided logistics support to 3 of the operations Rod had been part of in the 2000s. Though Garrett did not know this, And Rod did not know it on day one, and would not know it until he checked the family background in the week before he wrote the final assessment. Garrett was 24. He was physically excellent, his intelligence was genuine, and his confidence was the specific confidence of someone who has never been required to distinguish between the confidence that comes from having done something and the confidence that comes from being told he was the kind of person who did things. He saw Rod on day 2. In the mess hall, clearing trays, moving between tables with the efficiency and invisibility of someone who had been doing this for 11 years. Old, small, brown, gray uniform. A silver ring on his right hand that caught the light when he worked. Garrett looked at him the way his father looked at service staff. The name came on day 3. One of the recruits, a Filipino-American, named Corpus, who used the word lolo the way it was meant, as an honorific, as the Filipino word for grandfather, as the highest form of respect for an elder male, said it in passing near the mess hall, watching Rod cross the courtyard. Garrett heard it. He did not ask what it meant. He filed it as a diminishment and began using it immediately, with the precision of someone who has learned that naming something is the first step to owning it. Lolo, the old man. Grandpa, Rod heard it. He knew what it meant. He turned the ring on his finger and kept mopping. He wrote in the notebook that night, Recruit Voss, Garrett, day 3. Adopted a Filipino honorific as a slur without knowing its meaning, did not research the word before using it as a weapon. This tells you everything about how he approaches what he does not understand. The escalation followed the pattern he had seen 11 times. First the words, then the group, then the property. Garrett was methodical in a way that separated him from the simpler bullies Rod had encountered. There was strategy to it, a reading of the social dynamics of the unit, and a deliberate leveraging of them. By day 5, 27 recruits were enacting Garrett's edict without being asked, because Garrett had made the social cost of compassion higher than the social cost of complicity. Day 7, Rod's toolbox was moved. Not to the dumpster. Garrett was smarter than that. It was moved to an unlocked storage closet on the wrong side of the compound, which meant 40 minutes of searching before Rod found it, and 30 minutes of reordering the tools to their correct positions. An inconvenience designed to communicate that his time had no value. Rod wrote about it in the notebook. He wrote about the specific intelligence the act required. He wrote about the calculation behind it. He did not write about how it felt, because how it felt was not what he was here to record. Day 10, the group ostracism was complete. 27 recruits had been instructed not to look at, speak to, or assist the maintenance operative. The instruction had been delivered with enough social weight that even the recruits who showed visible discomfort with it were complying. Rod moved through the compound as if encased in a force field of deliberate non-recognition. He ate alone at the corner table under the flickering light. He worked in corridors that cleared before he reached them. He turned the ring on his finger. He thought about Tatay Luis, about the Gulf, about the specific loneliness of being out at sea, far enough that the land disappears and you are the only warm thing in an indifferent ocean. He thought about what his father had said, the person who demeans others is the one who has nothing to be proud of. He looked at Garrett Voss's face, in the mess hall, holding court, explaining to 3 recruits the strategy of extracting loyalty through fear, and he thought, not yet, but close. The pride is borrowed. When borrowed pride collapses, what is underneath will be the thing that determines who this man becomes. He wrote it in the notebook. He had been watching people find out who they were under pressure for 36 years. He was patient. He watched Paloma Cruz. She was the only Filipino in the class, 23 years old, from Daly City, the granddaughter of a woman who had cleaned houses in the Bay Area for 28 years and who had told Paloma, when Paloma said she was going to try for the SEALs, that she believed her, because the women in their family had always done impossible things quietly. Paloma was not the strongest recruit in the class physically. She was the most precise. She thought before she moved, and when she moved, she did not waste the motion. She had recognized something in Rod from the first week that she could not name, something about how he stood, about the quality of his stillness under pressure, about the way his eyes tracked everything without moving. She had grown up watching her grandmother move through spaces where she was invisible in the specific way that service workers are invisible, and she had watched her grandmother carry that invisibility without being diminished by it, and she had thought then, there is something about this that is not what it appears. She began recording on day 3. She did not share the footage. She did not know what to do with it yet. She kept it the way you keep something you know will matter before you understand why. On day 11, Garrett walked past Rod in the corridor and knocked his water bottle to the floor. Not dramatically, a casual bump. The casual violence of someone who has decided that another person's minor inconvenience is humor. Paloma was 10 feet behind them. She looked at the water bottle on the floor. She looked at Rod bending to pick it up. She looked at the back of Garrett's jacket moving away. She took 2 steps toward the water bottle. She stopped. She went back to her position. She wrote in her own notebook that night. Not Rod's notebook. Her own. 3 sentences about why she stopped. The sentences were honest. She kept them. On day 14, Rod was in the equipment room replacing a worn cable on a weight machine. Garrett came in alone, which was the specific choice of a person who has decided that what is about to happen should not have witnesses. He was wrong about the witnesses. The secondary camera, mounted 18 months ago in response to a missing equipment investigation, was recording. Paloma Cruz was in the doorway. Both of them saw what they saw. Garrett's hand found Rod's collar. He shoved. The rack, the sound, the sleeve riding up, the trident, the citation mark, the Filipino script. Dallin. Garrett let go. He looked at what he had done and at what he was looking at, and his face completed the journey from certainty to understanding that takes some people a lifetime and some people never. The door opened. Captain Marisol Diaz walked in. She was 48 years old, the first Filipino-American woman to serve as commandant of Naval Special Warfare Training Center, and she moved through the equipment room door with the bearing of someone who has been in command of things for a long time and has learned that bearing is not performance. It is the physical expression of having been trusted repeatedly and not failing. She took in the room in 2 seconds. Garrett, with his hands at his sides. The torn fabric. The tattoo on Rod's forearm. Paloma Cruz in the doorway with her phone and a step forward that had not been far enough. She looked at Rod. Her posture changed. Not dramatically. Not with ceremony. But anyone watching would have seen it. The specific adjustment of a person who has been standing at ease and comes to attention. Not the formal military attention of a parade, but the attention of a person in front of someone they owe. "Chief," she said. The word was quiet. It was everything. Rod looked at her. He nodded once, the nod of a man who has been seen correctly and is not surprised by it. She turned to Garrett. "Step outside," she said, "all the way outside. I want you in the main training yard in 3 minutes. Everyone else in the compound." 3 minutes. She looked at Paloma. "You too, Cruz." Paloma went. Whatever the assessment of her next 4 days would reveal, she would carry the knowledge of where her feet had been on day 14. The training yard. 28 recruits in a loose formation under the September sky, the Pacific audible beyond the perimeter, the smell of salt and tide, and the specific marine layer that sat over Coronado in the fall like a presence. Chief Petty Officer Ernesto Lim stood to one side. He had worked with Rod for 8 of his 11 September returns. When Rod entered the yard, Ernesto's spine straightened by a degree that the recruits had seen before and not understood. Captain Diaz stood at the front of the formation. Rod stood beside her, the torn maintenance uniform still open at the right sleeve, the tattoo still visible, the ring still on his finger. She did not use the formal introduction voice. She used the voice she used when she wanted something to go into people and stay. I need to tell you who is standing next to me. The yard was very quiet. This man's name is Rodrigo Aguilar. Master Chief Petty Officer, retired, 36 years of service to the United States Navy. 22 of those years as a SEAL. The rest in roles that don't have names you would be cleared to read. She let that land. He has deployed 22 times. Afghanistan, Iraq, the Philippines, Somalia, Colombia, and 4 other locations that remain classified at a level none of you will ever hold. During a maritime interdiction operation in 2007, he led a 4-man element into a situation that his commanding officer described in the after-action report as, and I'm quoting, "the most controlled performance of force I have ever seen in 30 years of special operations." He brought his people home. Every one of them. A recruit near the back made a sound and covered it. For that operation and its preceding actions, Master Chief Aguilar was awarded the Navy Cross. He is one of 2 Filipino Americans to receive that decoration in the post-9/11 era. She turned briefly to look at Rod, then back to the formation. The instructors who have trained you, Chief Lim, Petty Officer Reyes, Sergeant Walsh, were trained by this man. I was selected for officer candidacy by this man. 22 years ago. He looked at a 26-year-old junior officer and told the selection board she belonged in command. I have spent 22 years trying to deserve that. Her voice did not shake. She had practiced being steady in difficult moments for 22 years. But the effort was visible. Master Chief Aguilar has been returning to this compound every fall for 11 years. Voluntarily, without pay, without rank, without any acknowledgement in any official record that has public access. He wears that uniform. She indicated the gray maintenance uniform, and he does this compound's maintenance work. And he watches you. Not your pull-up scores, not your swim times, not your log carries, or your Hell Week performance, or your weapons qualification. She paused. He watches how you treat people you think can't hurt you. The yard was the kind of quiet that has weight. The report he writes, the one in that notebook, she indicated the small black notebook Rod held at his side, goes to the selection board and to the commandant's office. It carries the same weight as your physical assessments. In some cases, more, because a SEAL team operates on trust. On the understanding that the man beside you will act when it costs him something to act. We have excellent metrics for physical performance. We have excellent metrics for technical proficiency. We have almost no metrics for character. She looked at Garrett Voss. Until 11 years ago, when I called the man next to me and asked him if he would be willing to be the metric. She stepped back. Master Chief. Rod opened the notebook. He had written in it by lamplight the night before. He had written in it every night for 14 nights. He read from it the way he did everything, without performance, without decoration, with the specific plainness of a person who has learned that the truth needs no amplification. Recruit Voss, Garrett. Garrett's spine was rigid. His hands were at his sides. His face had the expression of a man who is trying to maintain the structure of himself while the structure is being examined from the inside. Physical fitness, excellent. Situational awareness, above average. Tactical instinct, present, requires direction. Leadership potential, significant. Garrett's hands tightened almost imperceptibly. Behavioral assessment. Rod turned a page. On day 2, Recruit Voss identified the maintenance operative as the most viable target for social dominance building within the unit. His selection was specific: age, race, perceived institutional isolation, and an assumption of powerlessness. He used a Filipino honorific as a slur without researching its meaning, an act that tells you not about cruelty, but about incuriosity. A person who uses a word as a weapon without understanding it is a person who is not interested in understanding what he does not know. Over 14 days, Recruit Voss coordinated targeted property interference, sustained verbal degradation, systematic group ostracism through social consequence enforcement, and on day 14, physical contact that tore the uniform of the subject of this assessment. He looked up at Garrett for the first time. None of this was impulsive. Recruit Voss is too intelligent for impulsive. This was planned, which is the distinction that matters most. Cruelty from anger is failure. Cruelty from strategy is character. He turned another page. Recommendation, he paused. Not for effect, to make sure he was reading the right sentence. Recruit Voss has the physical and technical capacity to complete this program. He does not have the character to complete it safely. A SEAL team in the field is a trust structure. What Recruit Voss has demonstrated here over 14 days to 27 witnesses is that he cannot be trusted to keep the people beside him as the priority when keeping them costs him something. He will sacrifice the weak. In training, that means isolation and humiliation. In the field, that means casualties. He closed the notebook. He looked at Garrett one more time. "My father came from Zamboanga," he said. "He was a fisherman. He put this ring on my hand the morning I left." He turned the ring slowly, once, on his finger. "He told me, a person who has nothing to be proud of is the one who demeans others." He let it sit. "You have a great deal to be proud of, Garrett. You were born with it. The problem is that what was given to you has been so thoroughly confused with what you earned that you cannot tell the difference. And that confusion is the most dangerous thing on a SEAL team. Because when the situation strips away what was given, and it always does, what was earned is all that's left." He looked at the yard. "And we need to know that what's there is enough." He closed the notebook. He looked at Garrett. "It is not enough. Not yet." Garrett Voss did not speak. He had been stripped of the usual materials, the grandfather's name, the borrowed confidence, the audience he had built over 14 days. He was 24 years old, and someone had just accurately described the thing he had been avoiding knowing about himself, and the accuracy of it was worse than any anger would have been. He requested voluntary withdrawal that evening. He was not ordered out. He walked out, which was the specific dignity the commandant had offered him, because she had read the notebook carefully and understood that Garrett Voss was not a finished story. He left through the same gate he had entered 2 weeks before. He did not look like the same person. Recruit Cruz, Paloma. Paloma was standing in the second row. Her hands were flat against her thighs. Her face was the face of someone who has been waiting for a verdict she is not sure she deserves to survive. Rod opened the notebook to the last entry. Physical fitness, at standard. Mental precision, above average. Tactical awareness, strong and improving. He turned to a specific page, day 3 through day 13, behavioral assessment. Recruit Cruz recognized the nature of the treatment of the maintenance operative from its earliest stages. She began recording on day 3, which indicates both moral awareness and the intelligence to understand that witnessing alone is insufficient. Paloma's hands were no longer flat against her thighs. Her fingers were curled inward. On 5 separate occasions during days 7 through 13, recruit crews displayed visible conflict at moments where intervention was possible. On day 11, she moved 2 steps toward an object on the floor before stopping. On day 14, she was in the doorway of the equipment room before the physical contact occurred. A pause. She took 1 step forward. The yard absorbed this. It was not enough. She did not reach the contact. The contact happened. But the step is in the record, and the step is the thing I am assessing. He looked at Paloma. The step tells me that the knot in your stomach that says this is wrong has not been reasoned away. It is still there. And you moved from it, even when you did not move far enough. He closed the notebook to the last page. Recommendation: Recruit crews continues in the program under standard evaluation. Character assessment is not complete. It requires more observation. He paused. But the step is in the record. Paloma Cruz's eyes were wet. She held them level. She was her grandmother's granddaughter, and her grandmother had held her eyes level through 28 years of cleaning other people's houses, and the inheritance of that held her now. 1 note, Rod added, and his voice was slightly different, not softer, but less formal. You have been carrying footage for 11 days. You did not share it with anyone outside the unit. You did not use it for your own advantage. You kept it because you understood it would matter without knowing how. He looked at her. That is also in the record. Rod stayed 4 more days. He finished the cable on the weight machine. He fixed a leaking cold water line in the East Barracks. He replaced a blown circuit in the mess hall ventilation system. He mopped the corridors with the same patient strokes he had been making for 11 Septembers. On the morning he left, he put the maintenance uniform on the hook in his room. Folded. Clean. Ready for next September. He packed the notebook in the footlocker. He locked it. He left the footlocker. He always left it. Because the compound stored it for him. Because they had been storing it for 11 years. And because leaving it was a way of saying, I will be back. He turned the photographs face up before he left. He never explained this habit, but it was consistent. When he arrived, the photographs went face down, because he was working, and the work required being no one. When he left, the photographs went face up, because whoever cleaned the room after him would see them, and he had decided that whoever cleaned rooms deserved to know that the person who had used the room had a face and a father and a history. He walked out through the gate at 8 in the morning. Chief Lim was there, at the gate, which was not his post. He was there because he had been there every September for 8 years when Rod left, because it was the one visible way Ernesto Lim had found to say the thing that his rank required him not to say in the compound. He straightened his posture when Rod came through the gate. He held the salute for 5 seconds longer than protocol required. Rod returned it, precisely, completely. Then he walked to the parking lot and got in his car and drove north on the 5 toward Zamboanga, which was the name he had given to his house in Chula Vista, because it was the name of the place he had left at 19 and would never leave, not entirely. He put the ring against the steering wheel. He felt the inside of the band against the leather. Dallin. He drove home. Paloma Cruz completed training. She was not the fastest or the strongest. She was the most precise. She had the specific quality that Rod had noted in his final assessment. The quality that cannot be trained because it lives in the part of a person that forms before training reaches it. She moved from the knot in her stomach rather than away from it. She became a SEAL. She did it in the company of a class that had been reshaped, quietly by 14 days of a quiet man with a mop and a notebook. On graduation day, she found Chief Lim. She asked him how to reach Rod Aguilar. He gave her a phone number. She called that evening. It rang twice. Cruz, he knew her voice, which told her something about the quality of his attention. "Sir," she said, "and then I want to ask you something. Ask the step." On day 14, one step. She paused. Was it enough? Not for the record. For you. He was quiet for a moment. It was the beginning of enough, he said. The rest is what you do now. She thought about that. My Lola, my grandmother, she cleaned houses for 28 years, she said. She never complained. She just kept going. I used to think that was strength. It is, Rod said. I think I misunderstood what kind. Tell me. She said, I thought it was the strength to survive. I think now it was the strength to stay intact, to carry the name. A long pause. Rod turned the ring on his finger, alone in the house in Chula Vista, looking at the photograph of Tate Luis on the desk, face up, as it always was at home. As it had always been at home, the old man outside the boat in the morning light of Zamboanga, squinting into the sun. Yes, he said. That's it exactly. Garrett Voss took 11 months. He did not go back to the compound immediately. He went home. He had a conversation with his grandfather that lasted 4 hours, which was not the conversation he had planned to have, because the conversation he had planned had been about vindication, and the conversation he had was about accountability. His grandfather, who had served for 30 years, and who had known men like Rod Aguilar, and who had also known the kind of man Garrett had been for 14 days, spoke to him with the honesty of someone who does not have time left to waste on comfort. Garrett listened. Then he went somewhere else entirely for 11 months. He did not go to a compound. He went to a food bank in Sacramento where his uncle worked. He went because his uncle asked, and he said yes because he did not have a better offer. And he arrived on a Tuesday morning and was introduced to the other volunteers, who were older than him and less physically impressive than him, and who had been showing up every Tuesday for years. He mopped floors. He moved crates. He carried things. He did the work that needed doing and received no acknowledgement beyond a nod and a thank you that was given the same way to everyone. On his third Tuesday, he understood something. He understood it because of a woman named Gloria, 71 years old, who sorted canned goods with a precision and care that made him think of the old man with the toolbox, who did the work completely, without abbreviation, for people who were not watching and would never know her name. He sat in his car after that Tuesday and thought about a ring. A silver ring on a brown hand. A word he didn't know but had used as a slur because he hadn't bothered to find out what it meant. He looked the word up. Lolo. Grandfather. An honorific, the highest form of respect for an elder male in Filipino culture. He sat with that for a long time. He went back to Coronado the following September. Not as a recruit, that door was closed. He went to the public information office and asked if there was a way to volunteer in a support capacity. They told him about the facility's maintenance contract and the positions that opened each fall. He filled out the application. He did not know, when he filed it, whether Rod Aguilar would be there that fall. He did not know whether the man he had called Lolo would be in the compound with a mop, while Garrett Voss pushed another mop down an adjacent corridor. He would learn the answer to that question in September. That story is still being written. The following September, a new class of recruits came through the gate on a Monday morning, 26 of them, 2 rows, shoulders squared, chins high, every one of them certain they had earned what was in front of them. One of them was looking at a small brown man in a gray maintenance uniform, moving a mop across the corridor floor, and turned to the recruit beside him. Who's the janitor? The other recruit, Paloma Cruz's cousin, who had grown up hearing the story, looked at the man with the mop and then at the person who had asked. That, he said, is the man who decides if you belong here. The recruit looked again at the old man. The old man did not look up. His mop moved in steady, patient strokes. The ring on his right hand caught the morning light once. Then he turned the corner and was gone. Before I end this story, I'd like to leave you with this. Tate Luis fished the Moro Gulf for 31 years. He never left the Zamboanga Peninsula. He never held a rank or a title or a decoration. He had a boat and nets and a son he was sending away at 19, and one piece of advice that he had probably received from his own father, which he had received from his. A person who has nothing to be proud of is the one who demeans others. It is a sentence about bullies. It is also a sentence about what bullying reveals, not about the person being targeted, but about the person doing the targeting. The targeting is always a confession. It says, I have found someone I can diminish, and the diminishing makes me feel larger because I do not yet know how to be large without it. Rodrigo Aguilar spent 36 years watching that confession, in uniforms and out of them, in units with prestige and units without it, in training compounds and operational briefings, and the specific darkness of situations where the confession becomes the difference between someone getting home and someone not. He watched it because he understood that it was diagnostic. That what a person does to the person they think cannot hurt them is the only reliable data point about what they will do when the cost of decency becomes real. He came back to the compound every September because the compound needed the data, and because he had made a promise, not to the compound, to a ring. Carry our name with honor. His father had been a fisherman. His father had died a fisherman, in the same boat, in the same gulf, at the age of 71. And he had been mourned by the people of the Zamboanga Peninsula, the way communities mourn the people who showed up for them every day, without announcement. His name was Luis Aguilar. Nobody outside Zamboanga has heard it. It was carried with honor. So the next time you are in a room where someone is being treated as invisible, as furniture, as weather, as the person who cleans the floor that others dirty, stop and look at what you are seeing. Not the uniform, the person, because the person is carrying something you cannot read from the outside. A ring, a notebook, a word in another language that means the most important thing, a history that would reorganize the room if the room knew it existed. The room almost never knows. That is the whole problem. And the whole point. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs it today. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and we will see you in our next story.